I was promised to the Duke of Blackthorn on a rain-soaked afternoon, the kind of gray day when even the birds refused to sing. I remember my mother's hands shaking as she fastened the last pearl at my collar, her fingers cold against my skin. My father would not look at me at all. He stood by the window of our crumbling manor, watching the Duke's carriage approach like a dark omen rolling over the hills. I had seen the Duke only once before, from a distance at court. They called him the Wolf of Blackthorn when they thought he could not hear. His name was Aldrich. He was not old, but his eyes were. They were colder than the steel at his hip, colder than the rumors that clung to him like fog. Men disappeared in his dungeons. Servants vanished without word. Wives, they whispered, did not last long in his house. And now I was promised to him. My name is Elara. I was born to a house that remembered its glory only in stories. Our banners had faded, our gold had dwindled, and every winter crept closer like a warning. When my father turned from the window that day, I saw the answer to a question I had never dared to ask written across his face. How far would he go to save our name? He would give me away. The Duke's carriage stopped in the courtyard. The horses were black as midnight, their breath misting in the cold air. The door opened, and Aldrich stepped out. He wore no smile, no token of warmth, only a dark cloak lined with silver thread and a sword that looked as if it had tasted more than battle. His gaze swept the manor, then settled on me. For a moment, I felt like a ledger being judged, a sum being weighed. His eyes moved from my face to the pearls at my throat, the simple blue of my dress, the worn hem my mother had tried to hide. Then he bowed, a gesture that seemed more like a formality than respect. "Lady Elara," he said, "you will do." Those 3 words sealed everything. My father exhaled, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders and placed squarely on mine. My mother's eyes filled with tears she did not dare let fall. Inside, something fragile cracked, but I stood still, chin high, because I had been taught that noble daughters do not wake the storm once the ship has already set sail. Later that evening, the agreement was read aloud. Lands, debt, alliance. My future turned into ink and signatures. The date of the wedding was set for the next full moon at Blackthorn Keep. Until then, I was to prepare, to learn the customs of his house, to leave behind the girl I had been and become the duchess he required. No one asked what I wanted, yet as the candles burned low and the shadows stretched long, I felt something else stirring. Beneath the fear, a memory, a story my nurse used to whisper when I was small, long after my parents thought I had gone to sleep. She would speak of the elven courts hidden beyond the deep forests, of their ageless princes who walked in moonlight and listened to the secret songs of the stars. She said that when mortal injustice grew too loud, the elves sometimes noticed, sometimes intervened. I had not believed those stories in years, but that night, when everyone finally slept, I slipped from my bed and went to the balcony outside my chamber. The storm had cleared, the sky was sharp with stars, and the moon hung thin and pale above the dark line of the forest at the edge of our lands. I pressed my hands to the cold stone rail and whispered, almost against my will, "If anyone hears, if anyone cares, I do not want this." It was foolish, childish. The forest did not move, the stars did not answer. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked, and my heart leapt into my throat. For an instant, I had the strange sensation of being watched, not by human eyes, but by something older, quieter, and infinitely more patient. Then the feeling faded, leaving me alone with the echo of my own words. In the days that followed, preparations consumed everything. Dressmakers arrived with bolts of silk I did not choose. Servants whispered in corners, their glances sliding away when I approached. My mother tried to teach me the names of the Duke's vassals, the proper forms of address, the dances I would be expected to perform at court. I moved through it all like someone walking underwater, each step heavy and distant. But at night, I stood on the balcony and looked toward the forest. Once, as the moon climbed high, I thought I saw a flicker between the trees, a pale light too steady to be lightning, too soft to be torches. It moved like a will-o'-the-wisp, then vanished, leaving my heart pounding and my mind racing with questions I could not answer. On the morning we were to depart for Blackthorn Keep, the sky was clear and mercilessly bright. The Duke's men waited in the courtyard, armor gleaming. My trunk had already been loaded onto his carriage. My father kissed my forehead and murmured something about honor. My mother held me, so tightly I could barely breathe, then let go as if tearing herself away. The Duke offered me his hand to help me into the carriage. His skin was warm, but his touch felt like iron shackles closing around my wrist. As the carriage rolled away from the only home I had ever known, I looked back through the small window. My parents grew smaller, then vanished. Ahead of us, the road cut through fields and hills. crawling gradually closer to the dark line of the forest. I did not know it then, but somewhere beneath those ancient trees, someone was already watching our progress. Someone who had heard a foolish human girl whisper to the stars and had decided that the story written in ink and signatures was not the only story that could be told. Before I continue this story in the next part, tell me in the comments what you think Elara should do, and if you want to follow every twist of her fate with the cruel duke and the mysterious elf prince. Remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Blackthorn Keep rose out of the landscape like a wound that had never healed. By the time we reached it, the sun was sinking behind the jagged peaks, staining the sky with bruised colors of purple and red. The carriage wheels groaned as we rolled over the narrow stone bridge that crossed a chasm of black water. I pressed my forehead lightly to the glass and stared. The fortress was not beautiful, it was imposing. Ancient towers clawed at the sky, their stones darkened by centuries of rain and smoke. No banners fluttered, no music welcomed our arrival. Only ravens circled high above the battlements, their cries sharp and joyless. So this, I thought, was to be my new home. When the carriage stopped, a footman opened the door, but the Duke did not immediately step out. He turned to me first, his eyes unreadable in the dim interior. "From this night forward, Lady Elara," he said, his voice low and smooth, "you are under my protection. You will obey the rules of Blackthorn. You will speak when spoken to. You will not wander the grounds without permission." Something in me bristled at the word wander, as if I were a stray dog to be kept on a short leash. "Do you understand?" he asked. "Yes, Your Grace," I replied, because there was no other answer I could give. We stepped out into the cold air. Servants lined the courtyard, their expressions carefully controlled. I noticed the way they kept their eyes down, the way their shoulders tensed when Aldrich passed. Fear had a shape here. It moved with him. An older woman in a dark gown stepped forward and dipped a curtsy. "Welcome home, Your Grace," she said. Then she turned to me. "And welcome to Blackthorn, my lady. I am Mistress Heloise, the housekeeper. I will see to your chambers." Her tone was polite, but there was a flicker of something in her gaze when it met mine. Pity, perhaps, or curiosity. It was gone too quickly, to be sure. Inside, the keep was a maze of stone corridors and vaulted ceilings. Tapestries hung on the walls, but their colors were muted, as if the very air had drained the life from them. Torches struggled against the shadows, and the scent of damp stone and old smoke clung to everything. Mistress Heloise led me up a spiral staircase to a chamber overlooking the eastern forest. It was larger than my old room at home, with a canopy bed, a carved wardrobe, and a fireplace lined with gray stone. Someone had already lit a fire, but the warmth did not quite reach the corners of the room. "If you require anything, pull that bell," she said, pointing to a cord near the bed. "There is hot water in the adjoining room, and a maid will bring supper shortly. His Grace has requested that you dine with him in the Great Hall tomorrow evening." Requested. The word felt like another kind of iron. "Thank you, Mistress Heloise," I said. She hesitated at the doorway, then closed it quietly behind her, leaving me alone. For a while, I simply stood in the center of the room, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the keep. Every new sound tightened the knot in my stomach. I went to the window at last and pushed open the shutters. The view stole my breath. Beyond the walls of Blackthorn, the land fell away into a sea of trees. The eastern forest stretched as far as I could see, a dark green ocean rippling under the wind. The last light of day clung to the treetops, turning them to burnished gold for a fleeting moment before surrendering to dusk. And there, at the very edge of sight, something glimmered. It was faint, like a silver thread laid across the shadows. It pulsed once, twice, then vanished. I blinked, wondering if the fatigue of travel was playing tricks on me, but my heart had already started to race, remembering the stories whispered on my childhood balcony. Elven light, my nurse had called it, the breath of their magic against the skin of the world. I leaned closer, straining to see any hint of it again. Nothing, only the forest, restless and mysterious. Elara. My name brushed across my mind so softly I almost missed it. It was not a sound, not truly, more like a thought that did not belong to me. I jerked back from the window, my hand flying to my throat. "Who is there?" I whispered. Silence. The crackle of the fire, the distant echo of a door slamming somewhere deep in the keep. I told myself it was imagination, the residue of old tales clinging to new fear, but a shiver moved down my spine, slow and deliberate, as if in answer to something I could not see. Later that night, after a maid had brought a tray of food I could barely touch, I lay in the unfamiliar bed and watched the shadows shift across the ceiling. I tried to think of practical things, the way Aldrich's eyes had measured me, the way the servants' shoulders had hunched, the life that waited for me as his duchess. Instead, My thoughts kept circling back to the forest and that brief glimmer of silver. I must have drifted into an uneasy sleep, because the next moment I remember is waking to darkness thicker than ink. The fire had burned low, the air was colder, and the hush of the keep felt heavier, as if the stones themselves were holding their breath. Then I heard it. Music. It was faint at first, like the echo of a memory. A single note, pure as water over stone, drifting through the window from the direction of the forest. Then another, and another, weaving together into a melody that made my chest ache. I rose from the bed and padded barefoot across the cold floor, drawn to the sound. When I reached the window and looked out, I saw them, lights moving between the trees, pale and fluid, like stars that had fallen to earth. The music grew clearer, twining around my thoughts, untangling the fear that had wrapped itself around my ribs. A phrase floated through my mind, not in words, but I understood it all the same. "You are seen." My throat tightened. "If this is a dream," I whispered, "do not let me wake." As if in answer, one of the lights broke away from the others and rose higher, hovering above the treetops. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a figure standing at its center, tall and slender, watching the keep with quiet intensity. Then the bell by. My bed jerked violently, clanging against the wall. I spun around, heart hammering, as the door to my chamber flew open. A guard stood there, face pale, chest heaving. "My lady," he said, "His Grace summons you to his study." At once, the music vanished. When I looked back at the forest, the lights were gone, swallowed by the night. Something told me that whatever waited for me in the Duke's study would change the shape of my fate. But somewhere, beyond the walls, in the dark embrace of the trees, someone else had already taken an interest in my story, and he was not human. The walk to the Duke's study felt longer than the entire journey from my family's manor. The guard who had come for me did not speak as we moved through the corridors of Blackthorn. Our footsteps echoed off the stone, each sound swallowed quickly by the heavy silence of the keep. Torches flickered along the walls, casting restless shadows that seemed to lean closer as we passed. I clutched my nightrobe tighter around myself, painfully aware that I had been summoned in the middle of the night, barefoot, unprepared. A ridiculous part of me wondered if Aldrich had chosen this hour just to remind me that my time was no longer my own. We stopped before a tall oak door reinforced with iron bands. The guard swallowed, then knocked. "Enter," came the Duke's voice, from within. Low, controlled, edged with something that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The guard opened the door and stepped aside, bowing his head. "His Grace awaits you, my lady." I walked inside. The study was large, lined from floor to ceiling with shelves of leather-bound books. A fire burned in a wide hearth, its light painting the room in shades of amber and shadow. A massive desk dominated the center, carved from dark wood veined with age. Maps were spread across its surface, pinned down by crystal weights and metal markers. Aldrich stood behind the desk, not in armor, but in a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. It should have made him seem less imposing. It did not. If anything, the simplicity made the harsh lines of his face and the strength in his hands more visible. For a moment he said nothing. His gaze moved over me slowly, taking in my loose hair, the thin robe, my bare feet on the cold stone. His expression did not change, but I felt exposed, as if every secret thought I had ever had was written on my skin. "Close the door," he said. The guard obeyed and retreated, leaving us alone. The soft click of the door sounded like the lid of a coffin closing. "Do you know why you are here, Elara?" he asked. His use of my name startled me. He had called me Lady Elara before, always with distance. Now, the title was gone, and I could not tell if that was an intimacy or another form of control. "No, Your Grace," I said. He studied me for a few seconds longer, then moved around the desk with a predator's calm. He stopped a few paces away, close enough that I could see the faint scar along his jaw, like a pale crescent. "You came to Blackthorn as part of an agreement," he began. "Your father's debts are paid. Your house is restored to favor. Chagne, exchange, you belong to me." The words were delivered without cruelty, without heat. That made them more terrible. "I understand," I replied, though my voice was thinner than I wanted it to be. "I do not think you do." He stepped closer. I fought the urge to step back. "This keep stands on the edge of a border that does not appear on any human map," he said. "Beyond those forests to the east lies a realm that pretends at neutrality while it watches us, with ancient eyes. The elven courts are not stories here, Elara. They are neighbors, sometimes allies, often something else." My pulse quickened. I thought of the silver lights between the trees, the music, the sense of being seen. "You will have noticed the forest," he went on, his gaze sharp. "Many brides from the lowlands cannot stop staring at it from these windows. They grow fanciful. They remember old tales and imagine that someone will come, riding out of the trees to rescue them from their obligations. He said the word rescue with a twist of his mouth, like a joke only he understood. My throat went dry. If you are to be mistress of Blackthorn, you will not indulge those fantasies, he said. You will not go near the eastern gate without escort. You will not speak with any stranger who appears near the tree line, no matter how fair they seem. The elves play games with mortal hearts, and they do not always need steel to kill. I found my voice again, though it trembled. Has anyone ever been taken? I asked, before I could stop myself. His eyes flashed, just for an instant. Once, he said, long ago. I do not tolerate it now. There was something in his tone that told me this was not simply politics. There was a wound there, old and buried under discipline but not healed. I wondered who had been taken and what price had been paid. He turned away from me and poured a dark liquid from a crystal decanter into a glass. You are to marry me at the end of this month, he said, as if continuing a simple list. The ceremony will take place in the Great Hall. Representatives from half the northern houses will attend. You will stand at my side, speak when required, smile when necessary, and otherwise keep your thoughts to yourself. I stared at his back, anger rising like heat in my chest. Am I nothing more than a symbol to you? I asked quietly. A tool to secure your borders and decorate your arm. He slid a glance at me over his shoulder. You are a promise made and a debt settled, he said. Whatever else you become here is in your hands. That answer hurt more than disdain would have. I straightened, drawing what little dignity I could around myself like a cloak. Then allow me this, I said. I will obey the rules of Blackthorn. I will respect your position, Your Grace, but I will not pretend I chose this. If you want my loyalty, you will have to earn it. It cannot be bought with ink and signatures. Aldrich regarded me in silence for such a long moment that I thought I had gone too far. His jaw tightened, and the air between us felt electric, charged with something volatile. At last, he set the glass down. You have courage, he said. That is inconvenient. I frowned. Inconvenient, I repeated. Most women who come here are eager to please, he said quietly. They learn quickly that fear is a useful teacher. You are afraid, Elara. I can see it. But you still speak. That is either foolishness or strength. Time will decide which. He walked back to his desk and picked up a small silver bell, turning it between his fingers. Remember this, he said, his voice colder now. Blackthorn does not reward disobedience. There are dungeons below this keep that have not seen light in years. Do not give me cause to reopen them. A chill threaded down my spine. You may go, he added. For a heartbeat, something in me wanted to argue, to demand kindness he clearly did not have. Instead, I lowered my head, turned, and left the study with careful, measured steps. Once the door closed behind me and the guard began to lead me back to my chamber, my knees shook so badly, thought I might fall. I focused on breathing, on matching his pace, on not letting the fear devour me whole. As we reached the landing near my door, I risked a glance through a narrow window that overlooked the forest. The sky was still dark, the treetops restless in the wind. You do not belong to him. The thought brushed my mind again, clearer this time, laced with a quiet, fierce certainty that did not come from me. I stopped so abruptly that the guard turned. Are you unwell, my lady? He asked. I forced a shaky smile. Just tired, I said. It has been a long day. He nodded and opened my chamber door. When I was alone again, I went straight to the window. The forest lay in shadow, but at its edge, a single light flickered once. Like a star winking in secret understanding. You are seen, the silent voice seemed to say, and this story is not finished. The days that followed settled over me, like layers of dust. Morning began with the chime of a bell and the clatter of trays outside my door. Maids moved around me with quick, efficient hands, lacing gowns, arranging hair, fastening jewels I did not ask for. They treated me with careful respect, never quite meeting my eyes for long. It was as if they were afraid that knowing me too well might hurt. I learned the routine of Blackthorn quickly. The great hall at midday, where Aldrich held audience with his vassals. The long, silent suppers at the high table, where the clink of cutlery sounded louder than conversation. The way the servants disappeared from the halls, whenever the duke's temper grew sharp, as though the very stones had learned to make themselves small. I did not see his cruelty outright at first. It showed itself in smaller fractures. A servant who dropped a goblet was not struck, but dismissed without pay. A steward who miscounted the stores vanished the next day, replaced by another with hollow eyes. Once, as I passed an open doorway, I heard a man's voice pleading, and Aldrich's answering tone, calm and cold. You signed your name, he said. You knew the cost. The door closed before I could see more, but the words stayed with me. He did not touch me, not yet. There were no soft gestures, no attempts to woo or charm. He inspected me as if I were one more piece of the machinery that kept Blackthorn running. At meals, he asked practical questions about my education, my father's lands, the alliances my name would strengthen. He rarely spoke of himself. The only time his composure cracked was when the forest came up. It happened one afternoon as we stood on a balcony overlooking the eastern wall. Aldrich was explaining the guard rotations to me, as if rehearsing the role I would play as mistress of the keep. I nodded where appropriate, struggling to focus. The forest drew my gaze like a magnet. I thought I saw a flicker of white between the trees, a shape that moved like a stag and a man at once. My breath caught. Aldrich followed my line of sight, and something in his jaw tightened. If you are wise, Elara, you will not stare so hungrily at the woods, he said. They notice when mortals look at them as if they are salvation. I turned to him. You are afraid of them, I said before I could swallow the words. His eyes chilled. I fear nothing, he replied. I respect dangers that have buried empires. Do not mistake the difference. That night, the music returned. It came later than before, when the keep was sunk in its deepest sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster to keep my thoughts from fraying. When the first note reached me, I knew at once that it was not human. I rose and went to the window without thinking. The forest waited below, an ocean of shadows. The lights appeared one by one, like dew catching moonlight. They moved in slow, graceful arcs, forming a pattern I did not understand, but somehow felt in my bones. The melody wrapped around me, soft and insistent, pulling on something deeper than fear. This time, when the voice brushed my thoughts, it was clearer. Do not be afraid. My hands trembled against the stone. Who are you? I whispered. For a heartbeat, the wind answered. Then the lights parted, and I saw him. He stood at the edge of the trees, where the grass of Blackthorn's land met the roots of the ancient forest. Even at that distance, he seemed carved from moonlight. His hair gleamed silver white, falling loose around a face too still and fine to be mortal. Armor of pale metal caught the faint light, etched with patterns that shifted when I tried to follow them. Behind him, the air seemed to shimmer, as if the world itself bent slightly around his presence. When his eyes found mine, the distance between us felt meaningless. You called to the stars, he said, and though his lips did not move, I heard him as clearly as if he stood beside me. You did not wish to belong to the man in the stone keep. My throat tightened. You heard that? I asked silently, uncertain how. To shape thought into speech, yet somehow managing. His gaze softened, if such a thing was possible for features so ethereal. We hear many prayers in the dark, he replied. Few are as honest as yours. I should have been frightened. Every story from my childhood warned against speaking with elves. They were said to be beautiful and terrible, their favors more dangerous than their anger. But in that moment, the fear that ruled Blackthorn seemed heavier than the one that waited at the edge of the forest. Why do you watch this place? I asked. His eyes flicked briefly to the keep, then back to me. Because its master has stepped too close to shadows that do not belong to him, he said. And because you, Elara of the fading house, stand at the center of a bargain that was never meant to be made. A chill ran through me. My father's debts, I murmured. The alliance, the wedding. He inclined his head. Your life was traded for land and coin, he said. But there are older laws than those written by mortal hands. You are not a thing to be owned. My eyes stung. What can you do about it? I asked, the words tasting of desperation. He holds the contract. The king himself blessed the match. The elf prince straightened, and for the first time I felt the weight of his title, though he had not spoken it. Power laced through the air, crackling like lightning just before it strikes. Mortals think ink is the final word, he said, but the world is woven from more than parchment. Oaths have weight, so do hearts. I cannot break the promise you made. Only you can do that. I laughed softly, bitterly. If I refuse him, I doom my family, I said, and he has dungeons waiting for those who displease him. The prince's gaze sharpened. He has dungeons for those who do not fear him enough, he said. But you are not alone, Elara. The lights behind him brightened, flaring like stars caught in the branches. Who are you? I asked again, more firmly. He hesitated, as if weighing the risk of the answer. I am Kale, first prince of the moonlit court, he said at last, and I have watched Blackthorn for a long time. The name settled into me like a key sliding into a lock. Why me? I whispered. His eyes held mine, unblinking. Because the night you whispered to. The stars, he said. You did not ask to be saved. You asked not to belong to cruelty. That matters. My grip on the windowsill tightened until my fingers ached. Can you help me? I asked. Truly. His expression turned grave. On the night your binding is to be sealed, he said, when the moon stands highest and the last vow is ready to be spoken, I will come to your aid. But you must choose, Elara. I cannot drag you from the path you walk. You will have to step away from it yourself. My heart pounded. And if I choose you over him, I asked, what then? His answer was quiet, but it burned. Then your life will belong to no man's cruelty, he said. You will stand under different stars, bound by a different kind of promise. Footsteps sounded in the corridor outside my chamber. Cale's head turned sharply toward the sound. The lights around him dimmed. We are seen, he said. Not by me. Wait, I begged, reaching out instinctively, though he was impossibly far away. How will I know what to do? His gaze returned to mine, fierce and steady. When midnight comes and the choice is upon you, he said, listen to your fear, then listen deeper than that. I will be there. The door handle rattled. I lurched away from the window just as it opened and Mistress Heloise stepped in, carrying a candle. My lady, she said, startled. You are awake. I forced my breathing to slow. I could not sleep, I replied. The keep is different at night. Her eyes flicked to the open window, then back to me. There was a shadow in her gaze that had not been there before. You should not linger at the window after dark, she said softly. Things in the forest look back when you stare too long. When she left and the door closed behind her, I returned to the window. The forest lay still. The lights were gone, but the echo of Cale's voice remained. Midnight, a choice, another promise waiting in the dark. For the first time since I arrived at Blackthorn, I felt something spark to life beneath the layers of dust. It was not hope, not yet, but it was close. The days crawled toward the wedding like a beast pulling a heavy cart uphill. Every sunrise felt like another stone added to the load. Blackthorn began to change around me. Servants scrubbed floors that had not seen soap in months. Tapestries were shaken out and rehung. Candelabras were polished until they caught the light like small suns. It was as if the keep itself knew it would be judged soon and was trying, in its own cold way, to look worthy. Letters arrived by the dozen. Messengers came and went through the gates, cloaks dusted with road grit. I watched them from the balcony sometimes, wondering what they must think of the pale woman at the window, the one everyone knew had been traded. One morning, Mistress Heloise brought me a gown to be fitted. It was made of silver-gray silk, the color of clouds before a storm, embroidered with threads that caught the light in shifting patterns. When I touched it, a chill prickled my skin, as if the fabric remembered winter. This is to be worn on the night of your binding, she said quietly. She did not say wedding. Neither did I. I stepped into, the gown. The seamstresses moved around me and practiced silence, pinning, tugging, smoothing. In the long mirror, a stranger looked back at me, regal, composed, eyes that knew too much. I studied my reflection and felt a strange, sharp anger. What exactly am I being bound to? I asked. Heloise glanced up. To his grace, of course, she said. I held her gaze. You have lived here longer than I have been alive, I said. I hear the way the servants speak. About him when they think he cannot hear. I see how they flinch at shadows. Do not pretend this is ordinary. Her fingers tightened slightly on the fabric. It is not my place to say what is ordinary for nobles, she replied. I run the household. I keep food on tables and fires in the hearth. That is all. That is not all, I said softly. You warned me about the forest. You know more than you say. For a heartbeat, something in her expression cracked. There was another girl once, she said, so low I almost did not hear. Before you, she came from the south, bright-eyed, believed she could soften him. The elves took an interest in her too. His grace did not like that. My pulse quickened. What happened to her? I whispered. Heloise's gaze slid to the door, as if expecting Aldrich himself to appear. She is gone, she said. That is all anyone is allowed to say aloud. The seamstresses pretended not to. Here, but their hands fumbled slightly on the pins. After they left, I stood alone in the gown, feeling as if every thread was a question no one wanted to answer. That night, the music did not come. I waited at the window until the moon climbed high and the forest lay in a restless hush. No lights flickered between the trees. No voice brushed my mind. A knot of dread tightened in my chest. Had Aldrich somehow sensed Cale's presence? Had he strengthened whatever wards guarded the border between their worlds? The next day, my suspicion found form. I was walking along the inner wall, escorted by a guard as always, when I saw them, men on the eastern battlements, hammering iron spikes into the stone. Chains hung from them, threaded through heavy charms etched with symbols that made my skin prickle. What are they doing? I asked the guard. Orders from His Grace, he replied. More. Protections facing the forest. No one crosses that border now, not from their side. not from ours. My breath caught. And if someone tries? I asked. The guard hesitated. The wards will answer, he said finally. I do not know how. I do not wish to know. That night sleep would not come. The silence pressing against the window felt wrong. I paced my chamber until the fire in the hearth died down to red coals. At last, in desperation, I sank to my knees beside the bed and did what I had not done sincerely in a long time. I prayed, not to the stars, not to Kale, not to any elf court I did not understand. I prayed to the same God my mother whispered to in the chapel at home, the one she clung to when the harvest failed and debts piled high. If there is any mercy left for me, I murmured, let me see the path that does not end in his dungeons. For a moment, there was only the sound of my own breathing. Then the candle by the window guttered and flared. I stood, heart pounding. A faint breeze brushed my face, though the shutters were closed. The air tasted different, sharp and clean, like the world after lightning. Elara. His voice slid into my mind with a wash of relief so intense I nearly wept. Kale, I whispered in thought. Where have you been? Held back, he replied, frustration rippling beneath the calm. The man you are promised to has bound old iron into his walls. It sings against our presence. It costs much to come this close now. I went to the window and pushed the shutters open. The night rushed in, cool and dark. At first, I saw only the restless sea of treetops. Then my eyes adjusted. He stood closer than before, just beyond the outer wall, where the ward shimmered faintly like a veil. His armor glowed softly, and his hair caught the moonlight. But there was a tightness around his eyes now, a strain he had not shown before. I thought he had driven you away, I admitted. He cannot, Kale said. Not while you still wish to be seen. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Do you always speak in riddles? I asked. When mortals stand between a cruel man and an old promise, he said. Plain words are often the first to break. A shiver ran through me. You said Aldrich has stepped too close to shadows that do not belong. To him, I said. What did you mean? Kale's gaze flicked up to the keep, then back to me. Blackthorn once held a different kind of pact with my people, he said slowly. A vow of mutual protection. We watched their borders. They respected ours. Then the last lord broke that vow. He sought power elsewhere, in darker places. My thoughts flashed to the chains on the walls, the iron charms etched with wrongness. Other courts, I said, not yours. His jaw tightened. There are things older than kings in either realm, he said. Some sleep beneath the roots of the world. Some listen eagerly when desperate men offer blood and fear in exchange for power. Your duke has whispered to them. They have listened. Cold sank into my stomach. So the dungeons, the disappearances, the fear in the halls. It is not only his cruelty, I said. It is his hunger, Kale replied, and the thing he feeds. I swallowed hard. And what am I to that hunger? I asked. You are lineage, he said simply. Your blood carries old ties to the first guardians of these borders. He means to bind that to himself on the night of your joining. If he succeeds, he will hold a key he was never meant to touch. The room seemed to tilt. So my father sold more than my hand, I whispered. He sold the door inside me. Kale's expression softened, though the tension never left his shoulders. Your father thought he was buying survival, he said. Men often make dangerous bargains in the dark. My hands trembled on the windowsill. You said you would come at midnight, I reminded him. That I would have to choose. What happens if I choose wrong? The question hung between us like a blade. Then you will belong to Blackthorn, he said. Entirely. And the shadow in its depths will stretch further than either of our realms can afford. Fear surged, hot and choking. And if I choose you, I whispered, truly choose. His eyes held mine, steady as stars. Then you will step out of the story they wrote for you, he said, and into one the two of us will have to survive together. For a moment, I could almost see it. A path through the forest under unfamiliar constellations. A life unbound from Aldrich's cold hands. Danger, yes, but a different kind. One that did not smell of dungeons and iron. Footsteps sounded in the corridor again, heavier this time. Not Eloise. Guards. Kale's gaze sharpened. He moves faster than I hoped, the prince said. He has brought the date forward. My heart lurched. How do you know? I asked. Because desperation has a taste, he replied. And he carries it now. There was a knock at my door, hard and insistent. Lady Elara, a voice called. His Grace summons you to the Great Hall. Guests are arriving. Preparations must be completed. My grip tightened on the stone. When? I asked Kale, throat dry. When is the ceremony? At the next full moon, he said. 2 nights from now. When the clock strikes midnight. The knock came again, sharper. Elara, Kale said, and there was nothing ethereal in his voice now. Only urgency. Listen to me. When you stand before him and the vows are spoken, remember this. You are not a thing he owns. You are a person who can step away. How? I demanded. He held my gaze as if we were the only two beings in all the worlds. Trust that the door will be there when you reach for it, he said. I will handle the rest. The handle rattled. I breathed in once, deeply, filling my lungs with the cold night air and the faint scent of distant trees. Then I closed the shutters, turned toward the door, and walked to meet the part of the story that would not wait. Behind me, unseen by mortal eyes, the wards along the wall trembled as if something ancient pressed against them, testing every link in the chain. The great hall of Blackthorn looked almost beautiful when the guests arrived. They lit every chandelier, every candelabra, every sconce. Light spilled across stone walls that had only ever known shadows in my time there. Long tables were laid out with white linens and gleaming silver. Fresh rushes scented with herbs covered the floor, hiding the dust and old smoke that clung stubbornly to the stones. For a moment, entering at Aldrich's side, I almost forgot where I was. Almost. Eyes turned toward us as the herald's voice carried across the hall, announcing my name and his. Lords and ladies from the northern houses rose from their seats, silks whispering, jewels catching the light. They had ridden days for this spectacle, for this union of a fading house and a powerful duke. I could feel their appraisal like fingers on my skin. So that is the girl he bought, someone near the front murmured. Too low for most ears, but not for mine. My spine straightened. Aldrich felt it too. His hand tightened just slightly on my arm, not in comfort, but in a warning. Smile, the pressure said. Look content. Pretend you chose this. I did not look at him. I lifted my chin and smiled at the room instead. If I was to be on display, I would at least choose how I held myself. We took our seats at the high table. A bard in the corner tuned a lute, clearly uncertain what kind of songs one played in a place like Blackthorn. Servants moved between the tables with practiced precision, pouring wine and placing plates. The hall filled with the sounds of clinking goblets and low conversation, the hum of noble intrigue settling over everything like perfume. I watched them, these people who lived in a world of agreements and alliances. Some looked at Aldrich with naked admiration, some with guarded calculation. A few could not quite hide their unease. They all knew his reputation, yet here they were, eating his food, toasting his union. Did they wonder what it cost me to sit beside him? Or did they assume a woman's choices were as interchangeable as the dishes on the table? Aldrich raised his goblet. My friends, he said, his voice carrying easily. You honor Blackthorn by your presence. Tonight we feast. Tomorrow we prepare. On the night of the full moon, under the witness of heaven and earth, this house will be bound to Lady Elara's by oath and blood. We will stand stronger at these borders than ever before. There was a murmur of approval, scattered applause. The word blood brushed cold fingers down my spine. He turned to me, his expression carved in perfect public. Courtesy. Will you honor our guests with a few words, my lady? He asked. It was not really a question. I rose slowly, aware of 100 eyes watching. I am grateful for your presence at Blackthorn, I began, my voice steady. My house has known lean years. We have known the fear of winter and the weight of debt. I was taught that alliances are made to survive such things. I can only hope that what is forged here will protect more than walls and coin, that it will protect lives as well. A small silence followed. It was not the response they expected. Aldrich's gaze cut to me, sharp as a blade, but he said nothing. A few of the guests shifted in their seats, thoughtful. Then the bard began to play, and the moment passed. As the evening wore on, I felt like an actress trapped in a play she had not auditioned for. I laughed when politeness required it. I answered questions about my father's lands, about the customs of my home, about the gown I would wear when the vows were spoken. No one asked if I was afraid. Between courses, I let my gaze drift to the tall windows along the eastern wall. Through the glass, I could just make out the dark line of the forest, a shadow against the sky. The full moon was not yet risen, but the stars were already bright. Do not stare, Aldrich murmured, too low for others to hear. At the forest, I said. His jaw flexed. At escape, he replied. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Later, when the feast broke into smaller conversations and the hall relaxed, I excused myself. A maid escorted me as far as the stair, then bowed and retreated. Blackthorn was full tonight. Guests filled the corridors with muted voices, their laughter thin in the cold air. I did not go back to my chamber immediately. My feet carried me along a corridor I had never walked before, drawn by a quiet instinct. The torches here were spaced farther apart. The air grew cooler. At the end of the passage, a door of dark wood stood slightly ajar. Old stone and candle smoke breathed through the gap. Curiosity won over caution. I slipped inside. It was a chapel of sorts, though not like the one in my family's manor. There was no stained glass, no carved saints, only a simple altar of gray stone, its surface worn smooth by time and something else. Above it, the Blackthorn sigil had been carved directly into the wall, the raven, the tower, the crescent moon. Someone had set fresh candles on the altar. Their flames burned straight and tall, unmoved by the draft. Mistress Heloise stood there, hands folded, head bowed. She looked up sharply when she heard me. "My lady," she said, "you should not be here." I hesitated. "I did not mean to intrude," I said. "I was only walking." Her gaze softened despite her words. "You are the one person in this keep who truly belongs wherever her steps lead," she replied quietly. "But His Grace prefers this place remain private." I stepped closer, drawn to the altar. "Is this where the vows will be spoken?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, the vows will be in the great hall, under the moon. This is for other promises." The hair on my arms rose. "Other promises," I repeated. Heloise's eyes flicked to the sigil on the wall, then back to me. "Blackthorn made a covenant long ago," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Once it was with those who walked in the light of the forests. Now it is with something that listens below. We keep the altar because breaking it would be worse. Some stones hold back worse storms when left undisturbed." My throat felt tight. "And me?" I asked. "What am I to that storm?" She looked at me for a long time, as if weighing whether to speak. "If you were truly nothing," she said, "they would not be so eager to bind you. Remember that." She snuffed one of the candles with her fingers, then turned brisk again. "Go back to your chamber, my lady. Rest while you can. Tomorrow they will keep you busy from dawn to dusk." I obeyed. In my room, alone again, I went straight to the window. The forest lay dark, the sky above it a vast bowl of stars. The wards along the wall shimmered faintly, a spiderweb of iron and old magic. "Kale," I thought, reaching out with my mind as I had before. "Can you hear me?" For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a single point of light appeared at the edge of the trees. "I hear you," came his reply, faint but steady. "The wards strain like chains when I draw close. But they have not learned your song yet, Elara. That is your advantage." "My song," I echoed. "You are not iron and stone," he said. "You are choice. You are will. They cannot bind what you refuse to offer." Fear and hope tangled inside me. "The full moon is tomorrow night," I said. "The vows at midnight. The Duke has an altar and promises I do not understand." I am running out of room to breathe. Across the distance, his gaze held mine like a lifeline. "Then breathe now," he said. "And remember this. He can summon witnesses, priests, even shadows from under the world. But when the moment comes, the words that matter will be the ones that leave your mouth, not his." My hands shook where they rested on the stone. "Will you truly be there?" I asked. "When the clock strikes and they call my name?" His answer was quiet, but it wrapped around me like a cloak. "Even if I must break myself against his walls," he said, "I will be there." The light at the forest's edge flared once, then sank back into the shadows. Stepped away from the window, heart pounding. Tomorrow, the story they had written for me would reach its sharpest point, but for the first time, I felt the faint outline of another ending waiting just beyond it, like a door drawn in invisible ink, waiting for the right light to make it visible. The full moon rose like a verdict. All day, Blackthorn hummed with a nervous kind of energy, as if the stones themselves could feel the tightening of the noose. Servants rushed through corridors carrying flowers, candles, bolts of cloth. Musicians arrived, their faces pale as they took in the keep's harsh lines. Priests from the capital were shown to their chambers, their robes whispering over the flagstones. They were here to bless a union that felt more like an execution. Mistress Eloise woke me before dawn. "Today," she said simply. "No, my lady, no softening words, just the truth, pressed into a single syllable." The hours blurred. I was bathed, perfumed, dressed. The silver-gray gown settled over my shoulders like a sky about to break. Jewels from the Blackthorn vault were clasped at my throat and wrists, cold as chains. My hair was braided and coiled, threaded with small pieces of moonstone that caught the light when I moved. In the mirror, I looked like the Duchess Aldrich wanted the world to see. Inside, I felt like a door left unlatched in a storm. As the sun sank, the great hall was transformed again. Tonight, there were no long tables, no feasting. The space had been cleared. At its center stood a raised dais draped in dark cloth. Behind it, tall windows opened to the night. The full moon framed between the towers like an unblinking eye. Candles ringed the hall in careful circles. A low murmur of voices filled the air as nobles took their seats along the walls. The priests stood near the dais, their hands folded, their eyes shifting uneasily from the moon to Aldrich. He wore black tonight, trimmed in silver, a wolf in formal hunting clothes. When he came to escort me from my chamber, he paused in the doorway and studied me in silence. "You look the part," he said at last. I did not thank him. I could not. "Are you ready, Elara?" he asked. "No," I wanted to say. "No, I will never be ready to give myself to the shadow you serve." I lifted my chin. "I am as ready as I will ever be," I replied. He offered his arm. I placed my hand on it because for the moment, I had to. The corridor to the great hall felt longer than it had any right to be. Every step echoed with the memory of Kale's words. "Trust that the door will be there when you reach for it. I will handle the rest." At the threshold, the herald's voice rose, announcing us. Conversation dimmed. All eyes turned. We walked together through the center of the hall, the priests waiting at the dais. I could feel the weight of the nobles' curiosity, the calculations in their gazes. Some saw power, some saw scandal. None of them saw me as more than a piece on a board, except perhaps one. As we climbed the steps to the dais, I dared a quick glance toward the eastern windows. Beyond the glass, past the walls and their iron wards, the forest lay in shadow. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw a pale shape at the tree line, like moonlight poured into human form. My heart lurched. Then it was gone, or hidden. Aldrich released my arm at the center of the dais and turned to face the hall. The head priest stepped forward, raising his hands. "We are gathered under the witness of the heavens," he intoned, "and under the gaze of the faithful who walk these lands, to bind Duke Aldrich of Blackthorn and Lady Elara of the house that faded in oath and blood." The phrase made a murmur ripple through the crowd. Oath and blood. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, fascinated. Beside the priest, on a small stand, lay a dagger. It was not decorative. Its hilt was iron. Its blade was dark, etched with symbols that twisted when I tried to focus on them. The air around it felt colder, thinner, as if it drank the warmth from the room. I kept my face still, but inside, everything recoiled. Aldrich did not flinch. He took my hand in his, fingers strong and certain. To the crowd it must have looked like intimacy. To me it felt like a closing trap. "Elara," the priest said, voice echoing slightly. "Step forward." I did. The hem of my gown whispered across the stone. "You come freely to this binding?" he asked, as tradition demanded. The words stuck in my throat. Behind his measured tone, I heard something else. A faint hum, like distant thunder. The dagger on the stand pulsed with a heatless glow. "Say yes," Aldrich murmured under his breath. His voice did not threaten. It instructed, as if the answer had already been decided. I stared at the priest, at the dagger, at the man beside me whose cruelty wore the costume of duty. In the far corner of my mind, I reached for the forest. Kale. At first there was only the sound of my own blood, pounding in my ears. Then softly, a reply. "I am here." The world did not change. The hall did not tremble. No one else reacted. But the tightness in my chest eased, just enough to let air in. The priest's gaze flicked between us, nervous. "Do you come freely, Lady Elara?" he repeated. I thought of my father's hollow relief when the contract was signed, of my mother's tears, of servants flinching from shadows, of Heloise whispering about a girl who had vanished, of chains driven into walls and something ancient listening below. I thought of a different night, on a balcony far from here, when I had whispered to the stars that I did not want to belong to cruelty. The hall held its breath. "No," I said. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. It rippled. Every face turned sharper. A murmur rose, quickly stifled. The priests exchanged startled glances. Aldrich's hand tightened on mine so hard it hurt. "You will answer properly," he hissed, barely moving his lips. "Think carefully, Elara." I turned to look at him fully. His eyes were fragments of winter. "You said once that whatever else I become here is in my hands," I said quietly. "I am holding what I can." Aloud, with my voice steady, I faced the priest again. "I do not come freely," I said. "I come because my family was cornered. I come because this keep holds too many dungeons for the word no to be safe. But I do not give my consent." Gasps scattered through the hall like dropped beads. The dagger on the stand flared, responding to words spoken against its purpose. The air thickened. Somewhere deep below, in the unseen places of Blackthorn, something stirred. Aldrich's fingers slipped from mine. "You do not understand what you are doing," he said, softly now, almost gentle. "You are right," I replied. I was never given the chance. His expression hardened, all softness gone. "Priests," he said, turning to them with command in his voice. "The girl is frightened. The binding will still be made. Consent was bought with contract and sealed with royal blessing. Proceed." The lead priest hesitated. "Your Grace," he began, "there are laws about spoken vows, about willingness. If we force her tongue to shape the words, the blessing may not hold. Aldrich's smile did not reach his eyes. Then, we will not force her tongue, he said. He reached for the dagger. The air shivered. Every instinct in me screamed. In that suspended moment, when his hand closed around the hilt and the room seemed to exhale, something inside me finally broke free of fear. I stepped back. No, I said again, louder this time, not only to him, to the dagger, to the shadow waiting hungrily below. The candles nearest us flickered, bending sideways as if pushed by an invisible gust. Outside, at the edge of the forest, a line of pale lights flared to life. The moon reached its zenith in the window. Midnight gathered itself like a held breath. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, the world decided which story it would follow. The world chose. The first thing that happened was the silence. Every sound in the hall dropped away at once. The rustle of silk, the breath of 100 onlookers, the soft creak of wood. Even the fire in the sconces seemed to pause. My own heartbeat thundered loud in my ears, then fell into strange alignment with something outside myself. The moon. It reached the exact center of the window, a perfect silver coin. Somewhere deep in the keep, a clock began to toll. 1. The dagger in Aldrich's hand flared, its dark blade drinking the light around us. A shiver ran through the stone beneath my feet, as if the keep itself had drawn a sharp breath. You will regret this, Aldrich said softly, his voice suddenly almost kind, the way a physician might speak before cutting deep. You have no idea what you have invited. 2. He turned the dagger, lowering its point toward his own palm. If your consent will not seal the binding, he murmured, then my blood will feed the vow. The shadow cares little whose veins open, so long as the pact is fed. The priests recoiled. One of them whispered a protest, but Aldrich ignored him. 3. The air grew heavy. The candles nearest the dais guttered, bending toward the blade. I could feel the presence beneath us waking, uncoiling like some vast subterranean serpent. It tasted the promise of blood, of fear, of chains tightened. Elara. This time Kale's voice did not slide gently into my mind. It struck like a bell. 4. The wards on the eastern wall screamed. It was not a sound with ears, but every bone in my body felt it. The iron chains that had been driven into the stone rattled so violently that flakes of mortar fell like gray snow. A jagged, shimmering line of light appeared along the far wall, racing toward the tall windows. 5. The glass cracked, not from force outside, but from pressure within. Pale lines spiderwebbed across the panes, lit from behind by a light that was not moonlight. The nobles closest to the windows scrambled back, hands raised as if to ward off something they could not see. Aldrich froze, dagger still hovering above his palm. This is my house, he said into the strange stillness, as if addressing more than the people gathered. My pact. You will not interfere. 6. The cracked glass exploded outward. No shards flew into the hall. Instead, the window dissolved into a spray of silver dust, carried away on a wind that smelled of pine and cold water. The night rushed in, vast and alive, and framed in the empty archway, standing where the glass had been, was Kale. He did not look like the distant vision at the forest's edge now. He stepped onto the sill with armor bright as captured starlight, a cloak of shadowed silver swirling around him. The moonlight curved around his shoulders as if reluctant to leave. His hair streamed in the wind, and in his eyes burned something, older than any kingdom in that hall. Behind him, at the base of the outer wall, figures moved between the trees. Elven warriors, their forms half shadow, half light, bows strung, blades drawn but lowered. They did not invade. They waited. The clock told 7. The hall erupted into chaos. Someone screamed. Another person dropped to their knees, whispering a prayer. A few nobles reached for swords, their hands shaking. The priests stumbled back from the dais, clutching their symbols of office as if they might shield them from what was coming. Kale's gaze did not waver. This binding is broken, he said, his voice carrying with unnatural clarity. Not by me, by her. His eyes found mine, and the din of the hall dropped away from me, leaving only the space between us. You refused, Elara, he said. The ink on their contract cannot drown that word. Aldrich's grip tightened on the dagger until his knuckles went white. You trespass, elf, he said, each word precise. This is a matter of human law. You have no authority here. Kale tilted his head, studying him. Human law stops at the edge of your walls, he replied. What you tried to bind tonight reaches farther. You have been scratching at doors beneath the world that do not belong to you. That makes it my concern. 8. The final toll of the clock hung in the air like a final heartbeat. Below us, the thing in the depth surged. I felt it rising under the floor, drawn by the promise of blood and vows spoken under moonlight. It pressed against the foundations of the keep, yearning to claw its way upward, to wrap itself around Aldrich's outstretched hand, around the dagger, around me. The stone beneath my feet cracked. A thin, dark line split the dais between us. From that fissure seeped a chill so deep it had no temperature, only intent. The dagger pulsed greedily. "Give me your hand," Cale said, not with command, but with urgency. His arm extended, palm open, reaching across the fractured space. My heart stuttered. Behind me, Aldrich moved. He grabbed my wrist, fingers digging into the flesh. "Do you think he offers you freedom, Elara?" the Duke hissed, his eyes fever-bright. "He offers you another cage, made of songs and starlight instead of stone. At least I am honest about what it costs to live here." Honest, I thought, and saw in a rush the dungeons, the hollow-eyed servants, the iron spikes in the walls. "You were promised to me," he said. "This keep needs what flows in your veins. Without that, the pact." The fissure widened with a sound like stone screaming. A gust of air slammed into us, knocking several nobles from their seats. The candles went out in a ring, plunging the hall into a strange, half-dark lit only by the moon and the glow from the broken window. The shadow below had reached the boundary of the old altar Heloise had shown me. It wanted what had been promised. Cale's voice cut through the rising noise. "You are not an object," he said to me, every syllable burning. "You are not a bridge he can lay over the abyss he dug. You can step away." My body shook. Aldrich's grip became brutal. "If you step toward him," he snarled, "you doom more than this house. The shadow will not simply retreat. It will devour what it can. My blood is not enough to hold it. It must feed on the life it was promised." His words were not wrong. That was the cruelest thing. His fear was real. His pact was a trap for more than just me now. There were people in this keep who had done nothing but serve their duties, sleep in narrow beds, cling to small hopes of surviving another winter. If I left, would the shadow drown them? All. The fissure split wider. From its depths, tendrils of darkness unfurled. Not smoke, not mist. Something denser, hungrier. They curled toward Aldrich's hand, toward the dagger, toward my wrist caught in his grip. "The shadow does not care whose blood it tastes," Cale said, his voice roughening for the first time. "It only cares that it is given. Choose where your life stands when it feeds, Elara, with him or with those who will fight it." I looked at Aldrich, really looked. I saw the sleepless hunger at the back of his eyes, the brittle edge of a man who had wagered everything on powers he barely understood. I saw, beneath the cruelty, a boy who had once inherited a crumbling border keep and had not known any way to save it but by reaching into the dark. "I do not forgive you," I whispered. His jaw clenched. "I did what I had to do," he spat. "So will I." I twisted my wrist, using the crack in the stone to shift my weight. Years of courtly dance lessons, how to spin away, how to turn at the last second, finally served a purpose that was my own. His grip slipped just enough. I tore free. The shadow lunged upward, reacting to the sudden movement, to the taste of a choice slipping from its grasp. It surged toward me, cold, endless, hungry. I leapt, not away, toward Cale. For one terrible, weightless moment, I thought I had misjudged the distance. The dais tilted. The world narrowed to the outstretched curve of his hand, and the scream of the thing below as it tried to drag me down. Then my fingers closed around his. The impact felt like colliding with the night sky itself. Light exploded from our joined hands, not soft moonlight. Something white-hot and ancient, bursting outward in a wave that slammed into the fissure, into the dagger, into every crack and seam where the shadow had seeped. The sound that followed was not human. The keep shuddered as if trying to tear itself free of its own foundations. The dagger shattered in Aldrich's hand. Fragments of dark metal flew across the dais, smoking where they landed. The tendrils of shadow recoiled, shrieking without sound, yanked violently back through the fissure, as if some deeper law had snapped shut around them. For a heartbeat, I saw it, not with my eyes, but with that strange inner sight that had woken the night I whispered to the stars. A vast, coiled thing, wedged beneath the world, writhing as luminous roots bound it tighter, roots that gleamed the same silver as Cale's eyes, the same silver as the old wards that had once protected this border before iron and desperation replaced them. Then it was gone. The fissure in the stone sealed over, leaving only a black scar like a lightning strike. The hall erupted. into pandemonium. Some nobles bolted for the doors. Others fainted where they stood. The priests fell to their knees, babbling prayers. Somewhere to my right, I saw Heloise standing very still, her hands pressed over her mouth, tears on her cheeks glinting in the moonlight. Aldrich stared at his empty hand, then at me. "You have ruined everything," he said, raw and stunned. "Do you know what we stand against on these borders? Do you know what will happen when—" Kyle stepped between us. "She knows enough," the prince said. "More, perhaps, than you ever let yourself see." He turned to the hall, his voice shifting, carrying a different kind of authority. "Hear this, people of Blackthorn, lords and ladies of the north. The pact made in this house with what sleeps below is broken. Its price will not be paid in this woman's blood, or in yours." Someone shouted that he had no right, that this was human land, that elves had no say in their bargains. Kale's gaze hardened. "When your bargains tear holes in the world we share," he replied, "your walls are not as tall as you think." He looked back at me. "Elara." My name in his voice steadied me more than any prayer. "You stepped away from cruelty," he said softly. "That choice is yours, and no one can take it now. But this next step, you must choose it too. I cannot decide for you." Behind him, the shattered window opened onto the night, onto the forest and the waiting lights. Behind me, Aldrich stood on a dais scarred by his ambition, in a hall full of people who would never forget what they had seen. I could stay. I could spend the rest of my life trying to patch the fractures in this keep, trying to convince nobles and priests and frightened servants that another path existed. I could stand beside a man who had been willing to feed me to a shadow, for the sake of power, hoping the broken thing inside him might someday soften. Or I could go. I thought of my younger self on that balcony, whispering to distant stars, believing no one heard. I thought of music that sounded like water over stone, of a prince who had watched from the trees, not because he needed a bride, but because he refused to see another life swallowed for a pact that never should have been made. My decision settled over me, like a cloak I had been meant to wear all along. I tightened my grip on Kale's hand. "I choose not to belong to cruelty," I said, "no matter what name it wears. If I must walk into a world I do not know to keep that promise to myself, then I will." Something in his expression eased, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. "Then come," he said. We stepped down from the dais together. No one tried to stop us. The crowd parted, stunned into stillness. Some bowed their heads as we passed, as if recognizing something sacred in a way they could not yet name. Others shrank back, fear warring with fascination. I caught glimpses of faces I had come to recognize. Kitchen maids, guards, scribes, all watching with wide eyes. Eloise stood near the base of the steps. As I passed her, she reached out and caught my free hand for the briefest moment. "Remember," she whispered, her voice shaking, "they only ever bind what they fear. Let that comfort you when the road is hard." I squeezed her fingers. "Come with us," I wanted to say, but her gaze had already turned back to the hall, to the house she had spent her life keeping alive. Her battle would be fought here. Mine lay beyond the wall. We walked through the shattered window and onto the outer ledge. The night opened around us, cool and vast. The wards along the wall flickered uncertainly, threads snapping one by one like overstretched cords. The elves at the tree line bowed slightly, acknowledging not just their prince, but the choice at his side. Kale steadied me as we climbed down from the ledge and crossed the grass toward the forest. When I glanced back, I saw Aldrich standing alone on the dais, a dark figure framed by candle stubs and a sealed scar in the stone. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. There was fury there, and loss, and the dawning realization that the story he had written had unraveled in his hands. I did not hate him then. I simply let him become part of another life I was already walking away from. The forest received us with a whisper of leaves. As we stepped under its branches, the lights that had hovered at the edge of the trees moved closer, revealing faces sharp and beautiful, strange and watchful. Elven warriors, courtiers, beings, older than the stone I had lived in. None of them looked at me as an object. They looked at me as someone who had chosen. The path beneath our feet glowed faintly, lit by threads of silver woven through the roots and rocks. Far above, the moon followed us between the branches, its light softer here, filtered through green and shadow. Only when the keep had faded behind us, swallowed by distance and trees, did Kale finally speak again. "The world beyond this forest is not gentle," he said. "Not even in my court. There will be danger, politics, pacts of another kind. I cannot promise you an easy life, Elara." I laughed softly, the sound trembling with exhaustion and something that might one day be joy. "I never asked for easy," I replied, "only honest." He looked at me then, really looked, and in his gaze I saw no chains, only questions, possibilities. "You will have that," he said. "As long as I have breath, you will have that." We walked on. Each step carried me farther from the girl who had stood on a balcony whispering to indifferent stars, from the woman who had almost been bound to a shadow in stone, toward something unwritten, toward a life chosen at midnight, with an elf prince at my side and a promise inside my chest that belonged to no one but me.